The first insult came before she reached the red carpet. Staff entrance is around the back. Grace Morrison looked up. I have an invitation. The security guard barely glanced at it. Behind him, photographers called the names of celebrities arriving beneath the crystal chandeliers of the Hawthorne Foundation charity gala. Grace wore the only formal dress she owned. Simple, elegant. The same dress she had worn to her mother's funeral 3 years earlier. One woman in the queue looked twice. Isn't she from Riverside? Another frowned. The slums. The whispers moved through the crowd, the way whispers do when people are not trying to hide them. I heard she grew up in a shelter. What is someone like her doing here? The event manager approached with a polished smile that did not reach his eyes. I'm afraid there's been a mistake. There hasn't. Grace held out her invitation. He looked at it. He saw the name. Then, without another word, he folded it in half and dropped it onto the red carpet. Someone lifted a phone and started recording. Grace looked at the invitation on the ground. Then she bent down, picked it up, smoothed the crease with her thumb. My mother always said, dignity is the one thing nobody can steal, unless you hand it to them. She turned away. She would not let them see her cry. Then, a black vintage limousine rolled to a stop at the entrance. Every camera turned. The driver hurried around to open the rear door. Out stepped Arthur Hawthorne, 82 years old, founder of the Hawthorne Foundation, one of the most respected men in the country. He was not expected for another hour. The courtyard erupted into applause. Politicians stepped forward. Major donors smiled. Photographers called his name. Arthur ignored every one of them. His eyes moved across the entrance, searching for something specific. Then he spoke 4 words that silenced the entire courtyard. Where is Grace Morrison? No one answered. His gaze moved until he found her, walking away. Invitation still in her hand. He saw the security guard, the event manager, the phones still recording, the tears she had refused to let fall. His expression did not become angry. It became something quieter and more devastating than anger. Regret. The kind that arrives when you understand you came only seconds too late. He crossed the courtyard as quickly as his age allowed and stopped in front of her. Neither of them spoke. For several long seconds he simply looked at her face. Arthur smiled through tears. I made your mother a promise. He gently took both of her hands. For a long moment he simply looked at her. Your mother became family long before either of us knew what that meant. Hundreds of cameras flashed at once. The whispers stopped. The event manager's face drained of color. Someone finally found their voice. Did he just call her daughter? The courtyard went completely still. 300 people. Not one of them moved. Not one of them spoke. Because what had just happened in the middle of that red carpet was not something any of them had a category for. A man who controlled rooms simply by entering them had crossed a courtyard full of the most powerful people in the city, to stand in front of a woman nobody had wanted to let inside, and called her daughter. If you have ever been underestimated by people who did not know your story, this story is for you. Welcome to Aurora Cinema Fiction. Stay with us. If this story moves you, please subscribe, like and share. It means everything to this channel. Grace stared at him. I don't understand. Arthur's voice dropped to something intended only for her. Before your mother died, I made her a promise. Grace looked at the old man in front of her. She had never seen him before. She was certain of that. Her mother had worked 2 jobs for most of Grace's childhood. Cleaning offices before sunrise, stacking shelves after dark. She had grown up in 2 rooms in Riverside, with a window that looked onto a brick wall, and a mother who never once spoke about those circumstances as though they were permanent. Margaret Morrison had treated poverty the way certain people treat bad weather. Unpleasant, temporary, not worth organizing your life around. She had died 3 years ago, of a heart condition she had quietly managed for a decade without telling Grace, because she did not want her daughter spending her university years afraid. Grace had found out about the illness from the doctor, not from her mother. That was Margaret. How did you know her? Grace asked. Not here. Come inside. There are things I should have told you, a long time ago. The event manager appeared at Arthur's shoulder. Mr. Hawthorne, the other guests are. Arthur looked at him. One look. The man stepped back immediately. Her invitation is valid. Make sure everyone understands that. He offered Grace his arm. She took it because she did not know what else to do. They walked through the doors together. Behind them, the courtyard erupted into questions none of the guests could answer. They sat at a small table in a private room adjacent to the ballroom. Arthur poured 2 glasses of water and did not touch either of them. 25 years ago, I was not the man people think I was tonight. He was quiet for a moment. I had built a company. Lost it. Lost everything that came with it. By December, I had run out of reasons to believe the next week would be different. Grace watched him. One night I was sitting outside a shelter on Millbrook Street, Riverside. Something shifted in Grace's expression. Millbrook Street was 2 blocks from where she had grown up. She had ridden her bicycle along that street as a child. She had never once imagined that the man who would one day fill this ballroom had once sat on its cold pavement, unable to walk through a door. A woman came out, carrying 2 cups of coffee. She gave one to the man beside me. Then she went back inside, and came out with a third. Grace felt something in her chest tighten. The particular feeling of recognizing someone you have loved, in a story they never told you. She sat with me for 2 hours. She did not ask about my failures. She asked me what I had loved about the work before everything fell apart. She asked me what I would build, if I believed it was still possible. He looked at Grace directly. No one had asked me that. A stranger on a shelter step in Riverside asked me the question that saved my life. Grace's voice was very quiet. What was her name? Arthur smiled. Margaret. She told me she had a daughter at home, 4 years old. Grace closed her eyes. She had been 4 years old when her mother volunteered at that shelter on Thursday evenings. She had not known that on one of those evenings, her mother had gone back inside for a 3rd cup of coffee and changed the direction of a life that would one day build all of this. I got back on my feet. It took 3 years. I tried to find her afterward, but she had moved, changed jobs. Life moved the way life moves. He reached into his jacket and placed a small envelope on the table. 18 months ago I found her, through a charity she had donated to. We spoke 4 times. She told me about you. She made me promise to find you, if anything happened to her. He looked at the envelope. She died 6 weeks after our last call. Grace looked at the envelope. Her mother's handwriting was on the front. For Grace. She had not seen her mother's handwriting in 3 years. She pressed her hand flat against the table to keep it steady. She never told me, Grace said. She didn't want you to feel like you owed anything to anyone. That was Margaret. Grace almost laughed. It was exactly Margaret. She was about to discover a promise that had been waiting 20 years to be fulfilled. She opened it alone. Arthur had excused himself quietly and closed the door behind him. The letter was 2 pages. Her mother's handwriting was small and deliberate, the way it always was when Margaret was being careful about something. Grace read it twice before she could absorb it. Her mother had known about the heart condition for 11 years. She had not told Grace because the day Grace received her university acceptance letter, Margaret had decided that nothing was going to interrupt that trajectory. Not illness, not fear, not the particular grief of a mother who understood she might not see everything she wanted to see. She had written about Arthur, about the night on the shelter step, about why she had gone back inside for the 3rd cup of coffee. I saw a man who had forgotten he was worth something. I know what that looks like, because I spent years looking at it in the mirror. All I did was ask him the question someone had once asked me. Kindness is not complicated, it is just paying forward what you received. She had written about Riverside, about the 2 rooms with the window that looked onto a brick wall, about why she had never described those years as hard. They were not hard, Grace. They were just the beginning. Everything that felt like a wall was actually a door. I just hadn't found the handle yet. The final paragraph was the shortest. Arthur Hawthorne is a good man. He will want to do things for you because he believes he owes me something. Let him. Not because you need it, because it will help him. The best thing you can do with kindness is receive it gracefully and pass it on. That is all I ever did. That is all I am asking you to do. I love you. Mum. Grace sat with the letter for a long time. Then she folded it carefully along its original creases and placed it back in the envelope. She stood up. She smoothed her dress. She walked out of the room. Arthur was waiting in the corridor. He looked at her face and understood that she had read it. Are you all right? Grace considered the question seriously. My mother spent her whole life giving people the thing they needed most, at the exact moment they needed it. She never made a production of it. She never asked for anything back. She looked toward the ballroom doors. And then a room full of people who have never had to smooth a crease out of their own invitation dropped hers on the ground. Arthur said nothing. I'd like to go back in, Grace said. You don't have to say anything. You don't owe that room an explanation. Grace looked at him. I know. But my mother's story deserves to be told somewhere better than a red carpet. Arthur held the door open. The ballroom fell quiet the moment they entered together. 300 faces turning. The event manager standing near the stage, with an expression caught between professional composure and the dawning understanding that he had made a significant error. Arthur walked to the microphone. He had been scheduled to speak later. He spoke now. 25 years ago, I was sitting on concrete in Riverside, with nothing. A woman named Margaret Morrison walked out of a shelter and gave me a cup of coffee and 2 hours of her time. She did not know who I was. She did not ask what I had lost. She asked me what I still believed in. The room was completely silent. I built this foundation on the answer to that question. Every program we fund, every family we support, every person who walks through one of our doors tonight as a donor, rather than someone who needs help. He paused. Margaret died 3 years ago. She never told her daughter about our conversation. She never asked me for anything. She simply went back to her life in Riverside and kept doing what she always did. He looked at Grace standing beside him. Her daughter was just told by a member of my staff that she did not belong here. The event manager had gone pale. Grace Morrison belongs here more than anyone in this room, because this entire room was built on what her mother gave me, and I did not build it for people who fold invitations in half. He stepped back from the microphone, and the room did something rooms rarely do. It went so quiet, you could hear the chandeliers. Then someone began to clap. Then another. Then the entire ballroom. Not the polite applause of charity events. Something different. The sound of 300 people who had just been shown something true and were responding to it the only way available to them. Grace did not stay for the dinner. She had never planned to. She had come because the invitation had arrived, and her mother had always said that when a door opens you walk through it, even if you do not understand why yet. She understood now. Arthur walked her to the entrance. Your mother asked me to make sure you were taken care of. I intend to honor that. Grace looked at him. I don't need to be taken care of. I know, that is exactly what she said you would say. Grace almost smiled. What I need is for the work she did to matter beyond one night in a ballroom. Arthur looked at her steadily. Then let's make sure it does. She left the gala with the letter in her bag, and the crease still faintly visible on the invitation she had smoothed with her thumb. Outside, the night was cold and clear. She stood on the pavement for a moment. She thought about her mother sitting on a shelter step in December, handing a cup of coffee to a man she did not know, asking him what he still believed in. She thought about the 2 rooms in Riverside. The window that looked onto a brick wall. The Thursday evenings at the shelter. 11 years of a heart condition managed in silence, so that nothing would interrupt a trajectory her mother had decided was non-negotiable. A letter written carefully, and placed in an envelope for a daughter who would not find it until she was ready for it. Grace Morrison had grown up in the slums. Her mother had given everything she had from those same streets. And a woman who never once described her circumstances as permanent had quietly become the foundation of something 300 people had gathered tonight to celebrate, without ever knowing her name. Until now. She walked home. She had work to do. The world would remember Arthur Hawthorne as the billionaire. But Arthur Hawthorne never forgot that his greatest investment had been a third cup of coffee from a woman who had almost nothing. Thank you for spending this time with us. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs it today. Subscribe to Aurora Cinema Fiction, leave a comment below, and tell us where in the world you are watching from. You might be surprised how many people felt exactly what you just felt. And remember, every story we tell is made with one purpose: to make you feel deeply and remind you that love, in all its forms, is always worth fighting for.